Hey friend, I'm genuinely glad you clicked on this video today. If you feel like subscribing, that'd honestly mean a lot to me. Now let's jump straight in. The first time Elijah met Camille, it wasn't some storybook introduction. No sweeping skies, no slow-motion glances, just a muggy, uncomfortable day at a local community cleanup Mason, his younger brother, had guilt-tripped him into attending. Elijah wasn't exactly feeling charitable. The idea of trimming hedges or taping up flyers was the last thing he cared about. He only showed up to get it over with and return to the solitude of his apartment in North Charlotte. Camille was handling registrations, buried in paperwork with loose strands of black hair falling into her face. She wasn't one for constant smiles, but the few she gave seemed to come from somewhere real. Elijah noticed. He just didn't give it much weight. He hadn't come looking for anything. Weeks rolled by. One evening, Mason hosted a casual backyard hangout for colleagues, and unexpectedly, Camille was there too. This time, she wasn't buried behind a clipboard. She had a glass of wine in hand and a soft laugh in her throat as she mingled with the crowd. Elijah found the way she laughed didn't quite match her body language. Light in sound, but her shoulders held tension. They ended up talking longer than they had before. When she left, she casually pressed her number into his palm. There were no fireworks, no lightning bolt, just a subtle connection quietly gaining ground. What began as a brief exchange became coffee, then dinner, then weekend errands shared in comfortable silence. She hated disorder. He avoided spontaneity. She longed for surprises. He needed routine. Yet, they made room for each other. After a year, they moved in together. Another passed, and they were signing marriage forms at a courthouse. No ceremony, no declarations, just initials on paper and weary but hopeful smiles. To Elijah, this was love. Calm, respectful, balanced. But even the quietest love can hide growing cracks. 2 years in, Elijah had advanced to director of risk security at a large firm. The position consumed him, late hours, weekend calls, and frequent flights. Camille, who ran her own branding consultancy, encouraged him. "Go after it," she told him. "We'll figure it out." And at first, they did. He sent texts from airport terminals. She left sticky notes with doodled hearts and gentle reminders. But by year 3, those gestures faded. The notes vanished. The messages went unanswered. He'd come home to cold takeout and an apartment that felt like no one had lived in it for days. Her home office door was always shut, her phone always face down. They still breathed the same air, but their lives had diverged. Elijah ignored it for as long as he could. But one brutal evening, after a grueling day and a canceled flight, he finally stepped into his home to find Camille curled up on the couch with a blanket and a half-finished glass of wine. She didn't even look up. "Did you miss me?" he asked. She said nothing. Hours later, lying in bed, she finally broke the silence, not with tenderness but detachment. "Do you ever feel like we're just acting?" she asked. He turned. "What do you mean?" This isn't a marriage. It's just 2 people with a joint lease." That was the first crack. More would follow. Camille began vanishing on weekends, casually calling them girls' trips. Elijah believed her. Until one Saturday, Abigail, one of Camille's longtime friends, texted him, asking if he still had the grill brush from last summer. He replied with a half-joke, "Hope you're enjoying the lake house." Her response froze him. "What lake house?" "I'm staying with my parents this weekend." Elijah didn't confront Camille right away. He waited, observed, watched her breeze in the next day with wind-reddened cheeks and a latte in hand like everything was normal. She mentioned how quiet and lovely the lake had been. He nodded. "How's Abigail doing?" Camille stiffened. "What?" "I talked to her yesterday. She said she was at her parents'. So, where were you, really?" She stared, processing. "It's not what it looks like," she muttered. But it was, and it ran deeper than one bad decision. Tyson. That was his name. Another brand strategist she'd worked with earlier in the year. At first, Camille insisted it was a single slip, a mistake she regretted. Elijah kept his cool. Was it recent? Her silence answered for her. The affair had been going on for months. She didn't cry. Not when he asked for details, not when he quietly packed a gym bag and moved to the couch, not even when the morning texts stopped. The next day, she cooked eggs like nothing had shifted. "You're really just going to shut me out like this?" she asked while cracking eggs. He stared into his coffee. "You already said everything I needed to know." She sighed, not apologetically, but as if he were the inconvenience now. Like his silence, not her betrayal, was the problem. Over the next 2 weeks, she pretended nothing was wrong, still wore her ring, still played wife when it suited her. But Elijah saw it all. The way she clutched her phone, the random errands at strange times, the sudden networking events with people he'd never heard of. She didn't bother to hide it anymore. He didn't explode. He strategized. It started with a quiet call to a private investigator, not for revenge, for certainty, for facts. The same logical discipline that made him excel at work now turned inward. A week later, a manila envelope confirmed what he'd suspected, and more. It wasn't just Tyson. There had been others. Flings, hotel rendezvous disguised as business trips, intimate dinners that didn't end with the check. Her job, it turned out, was the perfect cover. But the betrayal that cut deepest wasn't physical. It was in the things she said about him. In texts to Tyson, she mocked Elijah. "He's all logic, no soul. Kisses me like he's sealing a merger. Pretty sure he loves gym day more than he ever loved me." Elijah didn't react. Just read the screenshots again, then printed them. He slipped them into an envelope labeled Truth. That evening, Camille came home humming, kicked off her shoes, and asked, "What's for dinner?" "I left you something on the table," he said, voice steady. Still holding her purse, she opened the envelope. Her face changed after the first page. "Elijah!" He didn't look at her. "You made your choice," he said softly. "Now I've made mine." "What are you talking about?" "This marriage is over. I've already filed." She stepped closer, alarm rising. "You filed without even telling me?" "I'm telling you now." Her face shifted from guilt to fury. "You don't get to walk away without a conversation." He met her eyes. "You've spent months having conversations with everyone but me." She opened her mouth. No response came. Elijah walked past her, calm, deliberate, resolved. As he ascended the stairs, he spoke one final time. "You fooled me, Camille, but only once. You should have known better than to count me out." Elijah didn't sleep that night, not a minute. But it wasn't grief keeping him awake. That had faded gradually in the slow, silent erosion of their love over the past several months. This was something different. His mind was alert, calculating. He was already planning how to make sure Camille didn't walk away clean. By sunrise, he was seated across from his attorney. Dahlia Carver, sharp as glass, ex-prosecutor, with a reputation for unrelenting precision, listened to his account with a faint, amused smile. "She cheated, more than once. I want the house," Elijah stated. "And I want an airtight case," Dahlia replied. She arched a brow. "You're handing me daggers and asking for a light show. Let's make it thunder." Over the next several weeks, Camille fought with every manipulative tool at her disposal. Crying fits, twisted arguments, pleas wrapped in blame. "You weren't perfect, Elijah. You buried yourself in work. I felt abandoned." He didn't argue. He simply nodded once. "And in that emptiness, you found company. Again and again." It hit her eventually. He wasn't bluffing. In the end, the court gave Elijah the house. Technically, the savings were split, but with flawless documentation and years of careful records, he walked away with the lion's share. Camille was left with far less than she'd expected. As for Tyson, he never showed. Turns out, Camille had unknowingly been his mistress. He already had a wife. But karma wasn't finished. 1 month after the divorce was finalized, Camille appeared at Elijah's door. Her makeup immaculate, her voice sweetened with artificial warmth. "Hi," she said. "I thought maybe we could talk." Elijah leaned casually against the doorway. "Talk about what?" She hesitated, softened. "About us. I've changed, Elijah. I get it now." "Get what?" "That you were the only one who ever saw me, who actually loved me." He gave a small smile, calm, not cruel, the same serene demeanor he'd worn through the trial. "Camille, you never wanted love. You wanted worship. I stopped playing that role the moment I saw you for who you were." And then he shut the door, not in rage, but in resolution. She never came back, not to his door, not to the life they once shared. And Elijah? He never expected her to. What did surprise him was how little her absence weighed on him. The apartment was no longer suffocating. Gone were the unspoken tensions, the mental tightropes, the suspicious glances at phone notifications. His days settled into something new, steady, reflective, quietly joyful. He repainted the walls, replaced the carpet with hardwood, built a cozy reading nook beside the window. It wasn't a vanity project. It became his sanctuary. Mornings were for trail runs through the woods, evenings for catching up with old friends over dinners that should have happened years ago. At work, he began mentoring junior staff, people drawn to his steady calm. They didn't know his backstory, but they could sense he'd survived something and had chosen not to become bitter from it. Nearly a year later, on an unremarkable Thursday morning, Elijah received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, is this Elijah Bishop?" a woman asked. "Yes. I'm calling from East Shore Legal Services. You're listed as a reference for Camille Monroe, formerly Bishop." Elijah sat up slightly. "What's this about?" "We're investigating a civil matter. Fraud and breach of contract. A recent audit tied her business to a suspicious consulting arrangement." "I'll stop you right there," Elijah said evenly. "I have no ties to her, not anymore." A pause. "Understood. Apologies for the disturbance." He ended the call, sat there still. Then he laughed, quietly, not vindictively. It was the freest he'd felt in months. 6 weeks after the divorce, Camille had married Tyson in a quick courthouse ceremony. By the 3rd week, she regretted it. The man she'd run to was drowning in unpaid debts and had a child from a previous relationship. She hadn't found better, she'd settled for worse. Later, his friend Trina, a data analyst in tech, texted him a screenshot from Camille's Instagram. The caption, "Sometimes you have to rise from the ashes." Comments were disabled. Elijah didn't save it, didn't respond. He powered down his phone and went for a run. But life wasn't done writing its next chapter. 3 months later, Elijah received a formal wedding invitation. His younger brother Mason was marrying Vanessa, his longtime girlfriend. The venue, a private estate near Charleston. Guest list, over 200. Among them, Camille. Apparently, Vanessa and Camille had been close in college. Mason gave Elijah a heads up. "You cool with that?" Elijah shrugged, smiling. "I'm not afraid of ghosts." He didn't plan to stir drama. The universe had already made its moves. By then, Elijah had started seeing someone, Riley Jameson, a speech therapist with a biting wit and a soft soul. They'd met at a leadership seminar where she challenged him mid-discussion, and he'd found her unforgettable. They took their time, no rushing, no pretending, just honesty, respect, and shared values. Riley knew about Camille but never weaponized it. At the wedding, Riley wore an emerald dress and exuded quiet strength. Elijah looked elegant in a tailored black suit. Together, they moved through the crowd like calm in a storm. Camille spotted them as soon as they entered. She was seated 2 tables away, alone, no Tyson in sight. Her eyes caught Elijah's. He offered a neutral nod. Nothing more. Riley leaned in. "Is that her?" He nodded. "You want to leave?" He shook his head. "I want to dance." So they did. They laughed, toasted, moved easily together on the dance floor. Elijah never looked back. Camille watched from afar, but to him, she was gone. Not a villain, not a regret, not even a scar. Just a lesson, one he'd already learned. Life had moved on, and Elijah wasn't chasing it, he was guiding it. No flashy declarations, no social media digs, no wins to gloat over. He was simply building. He began volunteering at a youth center, teaching self-defense, mentoring boys from broken homes. No sob stories, no lectures, just presence. Among the sweat and silence, he saw glimpses of his younger self. Boys trying to become men without letting pain turn them into monsters. Riley fit into that world with ease. She never asked him to perform. They hiked, cooked, spent quiet Sundays together. She wasn't a firework, she was a lighthouse. One evening, folding laundry, Riley glanced at him. "Do you ever miss her?" she asked softly. Elijah paused, considered. "No," he said, "but sometimes I miss the me who believed she loved me." Riley didn't look away. She reached across the bed and touched his arm. "That version of you had hope," she said. "There's nothing wrong with that." After that, Camille's name never came up again. Until it did. Loudly. It began with an email from a business account he didn't recognize. The subject line, "Inquiry regarding Camille Monroe." Elijah tapped on the link, curiosity pulling at him like a thread. "Mr. Bishop," the message began. "Apologies for the intrusion. I'm representing a client, Ms. Monroe, in a legal dispute involving falsified billing documents and unauthorized use of personal data within an investment scheme. Your name came up as a previous associate of hers, possibly someone who could clarify elements of her past dealings. They wanted a brief call to verify a few details, dates that could support an ongoing investigation." Elijah read the text more than once before quietly picking up his phone and calling his attorney. "I'm not involved," he told Dahlia flatly. "But if she's back to scorching earth behind her, I want no part of the smoke." Dahlia wasted no time. Within days, she filed a cease and desist on Elijah's behalf. He never had to speak to anyone directly, but word spread anyway. Camille's second marriage collapsed. Authorities started sniffing around her business. Tyson? Gone. Rumor had it he drained one of her accounts and vanished across state lines. Elijah didn't gloat. He didn't need to. What he'd gained was worth more than retribution. He'd reclaimed his sense of self. 2 weeks later, while browsing at his favorite bookstore, Elijah noticed a figure he recognized. Tall frame, slouched posture, long coat hanging off her shoulders, wandering the fiction aisle like she was searching for a version of herself between the covers. Camille. She hadn't seen him yet. He observed her quietly, her movements sluggish, phone screen shattered, fingers chewed raw. She barely resembled the woman who once accused him of being emotionally distant. She was someone else now, exhausted, unraveled. He turned to leave before she noticed him, but then her eyes locked onto his. "Elijah." He stopped. "Camille." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "I wasn't sure it was you. You look really well." His voice stayed level. "You too." She gave a weak chuckle. "Number, you look better." He nodded slightly. "You look different." Camille hesitated, her expression flickering. "Could I say something?" He said nothing, just waited. "I blamed you," she said quietly. "For always working, for being distracted, for making me feel unseen. But honestly, you were there. I just kept running, wanting someone to follow me no matter where I went." She took a breath. "And when you stopped chasing, I assumed that meant you stopped caring?" He breathed out slowly. "Love isn't about running after someone while they burn down everything in their path." Her eyes shimmered. "I'm not trying to fix anything. I know I can't. I just wanted to say, I understand now everything." Elijah didn't respond with bitterness, just calm. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Camille," he said gently. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving her among stories that no longer belonged to her. He stepped into the afternoon sun, pulled out his phone, and called Riley. "Pick a dinner spot," he said. "What's the occasion?" she asked. "Closure," he replied. "Mine." That moment in the bookstore didn't magically rewrite Elijah's life, but something inside him shifted. There was a stillness now, a clarity. He wasn't running from the past anymore. He was walking toward the future with purpose and care. No longer hoping for apologies that never came. No longer waiting for karma to carry his name. Elijah had written his own ending, and it didn't require revenge. The months rolled on, then the years. He and Riley eventually shared a home. Nothing rushed, nothing dramatic. Just two lives learning to move together, slowly, honestly. She taught him that silence could be safe. He showed her that intimacy didn't have to hurt. Sometimes the past drifted back, on long drives or quiet Sunday mornings over coffee. Not with bitterness, with understanding. "Do you think people like her ever really change?" Riley asked once. Elijah stirred his coffee. Thoughtful. "They can," he said. "But only if they stop chasing reflections and start facing the truth." By then, Camille was just a name in stories that no longer mattered, a closed chapter. Word was, she lived in a rental outside Atlanta. Tried restarting her consulting firm, but it never found traction. Most of her former clients had moved on. Some said she was freelancing in event planning. Others claimed she was writing a memoir. Elijah didn't care. The man he'd become wasn't shaped by vengeance. He had risen from the ashes and chose not to stay buried in them. One crisp fall evening, Elijah stood near his backyard fire pit. Laughter floated through the night air. Children waved sparklers. Riley leaned against him, her head resting gently on his shoulder. A clink of glass interrupted the moment. "Speech!" Mason shouted. "Come on, man, give us something!" Elijah chuckled, stepped forward, and looked around at the faces around the fire. "I used to think strength meant staying solid," he said, "never showing a crack. But what I've learned is, it's what you build after you've been broken that really counts. What you decide to carry with you, and what you finally set down." He paused, his eyes landing on Riley. "There was a time I thought I'd lost something I couldn't survive without. But really, I'd just lost the belief that love had to hurt to be real." The group fell quiet, the words sinking in. "To growth," someone said, raising their glass. "To peace," another added. "To Elijah," Mason said, grinning. "The calmest man to survive a hurricane, then build a library where it hit." Laughter returned, but the stillness lingered, leaving its gentle imprint. Years later, Elijah still jogged those same park trails, older, steadier. People recognized him now. Some asked for advice, others just wanted to connect. Few knew his full story, but those who didn't pity him. They saw a man who had walked through fire and chose not to burn. A man who became stone, grounded, strong, and unwavering. And somewhere far away, in a city blurred by time and distance, Camille lived with regrets too tired for anyone to hear anymore. She had played her hand, made her choices, and learned, too late, that not all men stay broken when you leave them. Some rebuild, wiser, stronger, kinder, and some never look back. That's where we leave this story. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for taking the time to read. If you'd like to explore more stories like this, stick around. Until next time, friend.